So in this lesson, we are going to talk about adding and subtracting unlike fractions. This is chapter 4, lesson 4. And we go back to our essential question, what happens when you add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions? So we are still here on this part, adding and subtracting fractions. Later on, we are going to tackle multiplying and dividing fractions. In the last lesson, we talked about adding and subtracting like fractions. In this particular lesson, we are going to discuss how to add and subtract unlike fractions. Okay? So the objective of this lesson is for you to be able to add and subtract unlike fractions using the least common denominator. And later, I will also show you how to add and subtract unlike fractions with just a common denominator. Okay? So let's go right away to the key concept, and we are on page 292. You should have your book in front of you so you can take down notes. So the key concept in this lesson is to add and subtract unlike fractions, and there are 3 steps according to this rule right here. So when you add and subtract fractions with different denominators, first you need to rename the fractions using the least common denominator. Second step, you are going to add and subtract with like fractions. And third step, you are going to simplify the sum or difference if necessary. Okay, so before we even add and subtract fractions, we need to identify, or we need to know what unlike fractions are. Okay, so unlike fractions are fractions with different denominators. Okay, so when you have fractions with different denominators, you call them unlike fractions. So what we need to do before we can add 2 unlike fractions, we need to rename one or both fractions so that they have a common denominator. Okay, so how does this work? Let's take a look at example number 1. Example number 1 talks about 1/2 plus 1/4. In method 1, example 1, we are going to use a number line. So you have 1/2. Okay, start with 1/2. So this is your 0. Okay, right here. And you start with 1/2. Since it's a positive, you're going to the right. So 1/2. And then you're adding 1/4. So this is 1/2. And if you're adding 1/4, it goes to 3/4. And if you notice, the number line is divided into fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 1. So 1/2 is the distance between 0 and 2/4, or 1/2. And then after you add 1/4, you end up with 3/4. Okay? Now, the number line has been divided into fourths because if you notice, 4 is also the LCD, or the least common denominator, of 2 and 4. In method number 2, okay, the number line is nice and good, but this is impractical when we're adding and subtracting unlike fractions. So we will use method number 2 more than method number 1. In method number 2, we use the least common denominator, so we find the LCD of 1/2 and 1/4, or the least common multiple of 2 and 4. And the least common multiple is 4. Because if I have 2 and I have 4, and if I find the multiples of 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on and so forth, this is 4, 8, 12, and so on and so forth. And if you notice, 4 is the least common denominator, and that's the reason why you get 4. Okay? So from there, you get now 1/2 plus 1/4. Okay? And the least common denominator is 4 right there. And you ask yourself, what did I multiply 2 to get to 4? I multiplied it by 2. What did I multiply 4 to get to 4? I simply multiplied it by 1. So whatever you multiply the denominator with, you need to multiply the numerator as well. So 1/2 times 2 over 2 is 2/4 right here. Okay? And 1/4 times 1 over 1 is 1/4 right here. So now your denominators are the same. You simply add the numerators. 3 plus, or 2 plus 1, okay, will give you 3. So your fraction in simplest form is 3 over 4. Okay? So I told you I'm going to teach you again another method where you don't have to find the least common denominator. So this is the method that I'm going to teach you. Write this down if you need to know this, because this is actually shorter. But the only difference with these two methods is that in the method that I'm going to teach you, you need to simplify more often. So I have now, let's take a look at the same problem, 1/2 plus 1/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each fraction with the denominator of the opposite fraction. What does that mean? So I'm getting 1/2, and I'm going to multiply it with the denominator of the opposite fraction. In this case, it's 4/4. So I multiply this by 4/4, and I still get 1/2, and I multiply it with, sorry, not 1/2, I now have 1/4, okay, and I multiply it now with the opposite denominator, which is 2/2. So if you notice, I'm multiplying 1/2 by 4/4, and I'm multiplying 1/4 by 2/2. And if I do that, okay, what happens now is that this becomes 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, plus 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. Now if you notice, I have a common denominator of 8. So if I have a common denominator, all I need to do is add the numerators, 4 plus 2, okay, over 8, which is the same as 6/8. I told you in this particular method, you need to simplify more often. So in this case, we know that 6/8 is not in simplest form. So we divide it by its greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor of 6 and 8, or the number that can go into 6 and 8, the biggest number that can go into 6 and 8 evenly will be 2. So the GCF, or the greatest common factor of 6 and 8, is 2. So I divide that by 2/2. I still get 3/4. Okay? So this is another method that you can use, okay, a shortcut method that you can use when you want to add or subtract fractions. And that's exactly the same method when you're subtracting fractions. Okay? So let's do the got it. Before we do the got it, let's do letter A of the got it, and then I'll let you do all C, B, and D. You know what? I will do letter B, okay, and I'll let you do A, C, and D. Okay, so letter B. Let's take a look at letter B. You have 9/10 plus negative 1/2. So if I were to find the least common denominator of 9/10 and negative 1/2, I need to find the LCM of 2 and 10. So I need to find the LCM of 2 and 10. Okay? If I look at the multiples of 2 are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Multiples of 10 are 10, 20, so on and so forth. I stop there because I already know what the LCD is, which is 10. So I put my LCD there, which is 10. Okay? LCD is 10, LCD is 10. Okay? Now what did I multiply 10 to get to 10? I simply multiplied that by 1. So I simply multiply this by 1 as well. So I multiply 9 by 1. So this is 9/10. What did I multiply 2 to get to 10? I multiply this by 5. Therefore I need to multiply this by 5 as well. And that becomes 5/10. So I put the plus, and I still put the negative. I just renamed it. So I simply renamed negative 1/2 to become negative 5/10. Now I can subtract 9 plus negative 5 all over 10, because they have the same denominator. And we know that 9 plus negative 5 is equal to 4/10. Okay? And you have 4/10 now, and you simplify that. The greatest common factor of 4 is 2, so I divide that by 2, and I divide this by 2. Greatest common factor of 4 and 10 is 2. Divide both of them by 2, I end up with 2 over 5. Okay? So, the simplest form of 9/10 plus negative 1/2 will be 2 over 5. Let's try the other method. Okay? So again, this is method number 1. Let's look at method number 2 and see which one do you think is easier for you to use. So I have 9/10 and I'm going to add negative 1/2. Again, for us to be able to uh, add these two, what did I say? We are going to add, okay, the opposite denominator. So in this case, I'm going to add, I'm going to not add, sorry, I'm going to multiply this by 2 over 2. Okay, the opposite denominator. And I'm going to multiply this by 10 over 10. If I do that, this becomes 9 times 2 is 18. 10 times 2 is 20. Plus negative, okay, again, 1 times 10 is 10, so I keep the negative sign. 2 times 10 is 20. So if you notice, they still have a common denominator, and with that I can add them. Okay, so what's 18 plus negative 10, and we keep the same denominator of 20. Okay, 18 plus negative 10 is actually 8 over 20. And now all we need to do is simplify it, find the least common denominator of 8 and 20. The least common denominator is 4. So we divide this by 4 over 4. So we end up with 2 over 5. So we have the same answer, two different methods. In method number 1, we find the LCD. In method number 2, we simply multiply the opposite fraction. We multiply the fraction with the denominator of the opposite fraction or the other fraction. Okay? So do A, C, and D, and let's see if you understand this lesson. You can either use method 1 or method 2. So let's take a look at example number 2. Find negative 3/4 plus 5/9 plus 7/4. So if you notice, in this particular problem, negative 3/4 plus 5/9 plus 7/4, you have negative 3/4 and 7/4 with a same denominator. So we can actually add those two before we add or we take care of 5 over 9. So we want to group negative 3/4 and 7/4 together, so that we have now negative 3/4 plus 5/9 plus 7/4. We just copy the problem down. And now we are going to group the two denominators, or the two fractions with the same denominator. So this becomes now 5/9 plus negative 3/4 plus 7/4. So we are using, okay, first we use the commutative property of addition, where we move the numbers around, okay, and then we are going to, after the commutative property of addition, we are going to group the numbers negative 3/4 plus 7/4 together, okay, and that is the associative property of addition as well. So now we group negative 3/4 plus 7/4. We can actually add these two from our last lesson. We know that negative 3 plus 7, okay, negative 3 plus 7, it will give you positive 4. So we have negative 3 plus 7 will give us positive 4. So this actually becomes 4 over 4. And we know that 4 over 4 is the same as 1. And that's why you have it there. Okay? So after you add the two fractions with the same denominator, and you can come up with 1, all you need to do is simply add 1 plus 5 over 9. 1 plus 5 over 9 is the same as 1 and 5/9. And you're actually done. Okay? So again, to recap on this problem, first you need to add the two fractions with the same denominator in negative 3/4 plus 7/4. Okay? and then after adding them, add the remaining fraction. So negative 3/4 plus 7/4 is the same as 4 over 4 right here, or equal to 1. And if you add 1 plus 5/9 will give you 1 and 5/9. Okay? So do the problems on the got it, E and F, and let's see if you understand that particular example. So in example number 3, we are now subtracting fractions. Okay, so in subtracting fractions, in example number 3, you have negative 2/3 minus 1/2. Again, method number 1 is using a number line, so let's use a number line here. And when you're using a number line, you're actually looking for the least common denominator of 3 and 2. And to find the least common denominator of 3 and 2, so you want to find the least common multiple of 3 and 2. So this is 2, 4, 6. This is 3, 6. This is 3, 6, 9. And if you notice, I already found the least common denominator of 6. So in this case, we know that the least common denominator is 6. So we divide our number line into 6's. Okay. So you have now 0, negative 1, 6, negative 2 over 6, negative 3 over 6, negative 4 over 6, negative 5 over 6, negative 6 over 6, or negative 1, and negative 7 over 6. So first we get negative 2/3. Okay, so we go to negative 2/3 from our number line. Negative 2/3 is the same as negative 4 over 6. Okay, and we add negative 1/2. Why are we adding when it says subtracting? Remember our rule: when you're subtracting, you're adding. Okay, it's opposite. So negative 2/3 is actually the same as adding negative 1/2. Remember, when you're subtracting, you're adding its opposite. So you're adding the opposite of 1/2. So basically, that's negative 2/3 plus 1/2, and that's the reason why we are. So again, we add negative 1/2, and when we add negative 1/2, it ends up with negative 7 over 6. So negative 2/3 minus 1/2 is negative 7 over 6 if we use a number line. So if you use the LCD, it's basically the same thing. Okay, so we have negative 2/3, and remember, when we're subtracting, we're adding its opposite, negative 1/2. So we find the least common denominator, and we already know what the least common denominator, which is 6. So for us to get to 6, we multiply this by 2. Therefore, we need to multiply the numerator by 2. This becomes negative 4. Okay? And for us to get to 6 here, we multiply this by 3. Therefore, we need to multiply this by 3 to get to negative 3. Okay? And if you notice, negative 4 plus negative 3 will give you negative 7 over 6. Same thing. Okay? So let's use the other method that I taught you in terms of multiplying the fraction with the opposite denominator, or the denominator of the other fraction. So let's redo that, and let's do this method. They have again negative 2/3. Okay. Okay, again, when we're subtracting, we're adding its opposite, so it's basically the same as negative plus negative 1/2. Again, we multiply it with the opposite denominator. So we multiply this with 2 over 2, and we multiply this with 3 over 3. So we know that negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, is over 6, plus negative 1 times 3 is negative 3 over 6. Now if you notice, this is the same as negative 7 over 6. Same thing. So is this simplified? Yes, it is, because the greatest common factor is of 7 and 6 is 1. We can actually leave it as negative 7 over 6. So if you notice, we actually did 3 methods: the number line method, the LCD method, and the shortcut method that I just showed you. Okay? So let's do one of these got it problems, and I'll let you do the other 2. So let's do let's do letter G. So in letter G, you have 5/8. Okay, minus 1/4. And if you notice, I'm writing this down vertically because it's easier to solve this when it's all vertical. So I want to find the LCD of 4 and 8. So if I get the LCD of 4, or the LCM of 4 and 8, I get 4, 8, 12, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is 8, 16, 24, so on and so forth. I did not continue because I can already see the LCD, which is 8. So that's 8, that's 8. I multiply this by 2. Therefore, I need to multiply that by 2. So this is 2. This one I multiplied by 1. And therefore, I only multiply this by 1 as well. I end up with 5/8. So now I get 5. Okay. 5 minus 2 is 3. And I keep the denominator the same, which is 8. So that is the least common. Okay. That is the least common denominator method. Let's use the shortcut method, which I just taught you. So I have 5/8 minus 1/4. I multiply both of them with each other's denominator. So I multiply this by 4/4, and I multiply this by 8/8. Now, if you also notice, if I multiply this by 4/4, 4/4 is equal to 1. 8/8 is equal to 1. And if you remember the identity property, okay, the identity property of multiplication simply states that if you multiply a number by 1, the number will not change. So basically what I'm doing, I'm not changing the number still remains the same. The fraction still remains the same. I am just renaming the fraction. That's the reason why this works, because we're multiplying it by 1 and we're not really changing the fraction. So going back here, if I multiply that by 4/4, this becomes 20/32. Okay, and this becomes 8/32. So if you notice, they have the same denominator. I keep the denominator. 20 minus 8 is 12. Okay, and I simply get the greatest common factor of 12 and 32, which is actually equal to 4. So I divide that by 4 on both. This becomes 3/8. So that is using the shortcut method that I just showed you. So now you can do H and I on your own. The final example is, of course, a word problem. We are always end up with a word problem in every lesson that we're going to have in this book. So add and subtract unlike fractions to solve real-world problems. Example number 4. Use the table to find the fraction of the total population that has type A or type B blood. So basically, we're taking a look at type A and type B. So those two. Okay? It says here, use the table to find the fraction of the total population. Total means addition. So we're basically getting type A, which is 21/50. And we're adding 1/10, which is type B blood. Okay, again, using the LCD of 10 and 50 is actually 50. Okay, so we keep the LCD the same, 50/50. Okay, if I'm going to do this vertically, I'm going to do it this way, 21/50 plus 1/50. Okay, LCD is 50. So this is multiplied by 1 to get to 50. Okay, and this is basically, oh sorry, my bad, this is 10 actually. Let me redo this, 1/10. And LCD is 50. Multiply this by 5/5. So this becomes a 5/50. Multiply this by 1/1. It becomes 21/50. Simply add 21 plus 5. Give you 26, which is the same as 13/25, because the GCF of, so this becomes, 26/50, and since the GCF of 26 and 50 is 2. We divide this by 2 over 2, which is 13 over 25. And that's how you got 13 over 25. So 13 over 25 of population has type A or type B blood. Okay? And we are done. Thanks for watching.